Welcome
to New Entry Wrestling Podcast, baby.
Hey, Ian, hey, listeners.
All right, listeners, before we get started, please go check out our merch store on teesprings.com. And now we're also on Pro Wrestling Tees. Search for New Entry Wrestling Podcast.
Also, please follow our Instagram, New Wrestling Pod. We're on Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts. You can also check out our YouTube. Please and thank you.
Yeah. What's up, Jose? Welcome back, baby.
What's up? What's up? Good to be back.
I'm glad you're back. All right, man. How you been?
Good, man. Just been keeping life steady.
Amen to that, my brother. I need a massage. My shoulder hurts right here. I try to open that bag, the pizza rolls.
Oh,
yeah, it got an owie, man. It hurts. But all right, man. For today's episode, this one's kind of hard to explain. So the reason I brought you on this show because I'm here to give you my top 10 lists of matches I believe should have main evented that pay-per-view or could have, or
right,
or even why didn't it? When we all thought that was going to be the main event and it turns out it wasn't. But yeah, so I'm just gonna go ahead and get straight to it. Also, another reason why I brought you on here is because I want to get your opinion on my list. Because I rated it down from 10 to 1. So this is, obviously number 1 is like crazy to me. They didn't even main event it. So would it be my best or would it be my worst?
Hard to say.
This is like, okay.
It's one of those thinkers. It's a thinker.
Yeah. So anyways, my number 10, right, is Dolph Ziggler versus The Miz at No Mercy for the title, career versus title, right? Dolph Ziggler was putting his career on the line against Miz's title, the IC title. This was the semi-main event match. The match the main evented was Bray Wyatt versus Randy Orton. So, and the opening match was AJ Styles versus John Cena versus Dean Ambrose for the WWE Championship. And with the whole, even of that match alone, it's a main event match. And Randy Orton, Bray Wyatt, I mean, it could have main evented, but when you really had the top guy, the guy who's supposed to be the top babyface for WWE, Dolph Ziggler, and also who's putting his career on the line because he basically just realized like he just hit his glass ceiling because he lost to Dean Ambrose. So the IC title was like basically the second closest thing to a world title for him.
Yeah. And
then with The Miz, The Miz had a great run as the IC champion throughout that whole time. I don't know. I don't think he was champion for that long, or was that the whole when he started doing that the title reign, like he started doing the countdowns on how long he's been champion.
I think so. I think that was that was that period.
Okay, I couldn't remember that part
because he's a multiple-time champion, so it's hard to pin like all of his reigns and runs to see what he actually did in each one.
But that run was when he defeated Zack Ryder.
Yeah,
after he won at WrestleMania. So yeah, it was just crazy, and with the whole storyline to it, the fact when I saw the show and I'm like, oh wow, John Cena, AJ Styles, and Dean Ambrose are opening the match, and I'm thinking, oh, it's gonna be Dolph Ziggler versus The Miz, and it turns out it was the other way around. It was Randy Orton and Bray Wyatt. It was still a good match. It was just the fact that Dolph Ziggler won the IC title and celebrated like he won the world title. It should have closed the show that way. A happy ending, and he should have gotten been in that main event spot. Because
That's true.
It just proves that's how like he did the whole like dreams to do come true, basically.
Right. The boyhood dream kind of thing.
Right.
Like on.
Even though it's for the IC title, because it's like, yeah, I lost at the WWE championship, so I gotta go after another title. And he had to put his career on the line. It would have been cool if he was still continuing the feud with Dean Ambrose, and Dean Ambrose was the heel.
That would have been, yeah, but at the time, Dean was, you know, the one time he did try to go heel with, what was it, with Seth,
Yeah,
it was just not clicking. It wasn't
because
working. They were having to
well,
do
to
all
be
the,
fair, it wasn't Dean Ambrose. It
yeah,
wasn't his heel version. It was creative size
creative
version.
side.
But
And
that's my list. Obviously, I'll get more of your feedback once I give you my list, because at least that way you have something to compare it to.
okay,
Number 9 is CM Punk versus Brock Lesnar, SummerSlam, 2012. That everybody thought this is the biggest match for SummerSlam in history, and it didn't even close out the show. It was like in the first 90 minutes of the show when it went on, because I believe there was 2 more matches after that, or 3.
right, right. It was, yeah, somewhere in the midpoint.
Right. And the fact that, and then don't get me wrong, from John Cena, John Cena and Daniel Bryan, Randy Orton, I understand everything, because Daniel was gonna have his moment, but then that moment got taken away from Triple H and Randy Orton, which makes it seem like, okay, so wait, you took something from us. We got what we wanted, and that was Daniel Bryan to become WWE champion. It finally happened. But then you had the baby face on top winning, could have ended the show, but instead you had the heel come out, or Randy Orton was a face who turned heel to become WWE champion. Where it was like, if the heel was gonna be on top, you should have just had CM Punk versus Brock Lesnar going over. And I'm just going base because 2010, the Nexus versus Team WWE, John Cena, the whole story rumor
Right.
said that, it was, I don't remember which Vince told the Nexus that Cena's going over
Oh,
because we got to have the family go, the family be happy, John Cena,
right,
WWE. But then reality was John Cena told Vince he didn't want to put them over.
right. That he didn't think
So,
that it was their time and stuff like that, and
right,
he ended up regretting that because he saw how much of a detriment it was to the Nexus and to how it pretty much stopped their run.
right. And I guess, I mean, it'd be fine if somebody told Vince, hey, this feud is just going to go towards SummerSlam. And maybe he said the way, like, oh, then if this is it for me against the Nexus, shouldn't I just go over? I feel like that's what happened.
Right,
Um, I feel like, because if John Cena knew, okay, I'm gonna continue this feud with them, why go over in the first place? So I feel like that part of me feel like there was a little miscommunication back there.
could be.
So, but anyways, yeah. So my number 9, CM Punk versus Brock Lesnar, it was a great match. Uh, Definitely back and forth. There were some moments where Punk thought we had Brock Lesnar beat, and Brock Lesnar got the W, where hitting CM Punk with an F5 on the steel chair. What's your thoughts on that match?
That match, I agree with you. It should have been the one to close the show. I mean, we even ranked it in our SummerSlam episode when we
Right.
were ranking our matches because that match was one that stole the show. And storyline wise, it had a big enough storyline that it could have warranted the final spot, the final main event spot. Because we already know how on these shows they call it a main event type match, but it just really means it's in the top three
It
of
it,
the
it
of the
basically
billing.
headlined the pay-per-view.
Right.
And it's like when UFC does it, like we're promoting this big fight, but it doesn't mean it's closing the show.
Right.
It's
It's
just
one of the top.
this is just the fight that everybody's talking about. So that's why
Right.
we're promoting it.
And I mean, I knew what they were going for with the whole Daniel Bryan angle because that was kind of basically what started his push
Right.
and started getting him over as a babyface because he got screwed over by the authorities, started that whole angle. And even then, you could have still had that as the second to last match and still could have pulled off all of that stuff there. But just
Right.
the story and the quality of the match that Brock and Punk had definitely warranted that it should have been in a main event spot.
And here's the thing: if the it should have just, besides the build up to the match and the two biggest names in WWE, um, there was no title involved. There was nothing. It should have just closed the show, and then Vince would have, just could have just had CM Punk get his spot on the top again
Right.
without John Cena. And it's like, the fact is, like, that was clearly a shot towards CM Punk. Because that, before that and after that, Brock Lesnar was in the main event picture. But I will say this though, the fact that he wasn't, what if it was in the main event, the match would have turned out the same? Because if it would have happened, let's just say Cena and Daniel Bryan went over, and then Daniel Bryan wins, and it's like, now we gotta have this big match.
I think it definitely still would have, and just for the fact that we've kind of noticed a trend with Brock whenever he wrestles smaller guys, especially smaller guys that he gets along with, respects, and likes, he will have an outstanding match with them. And to put in case in point, the matches with Daniel Bryan and the matches with AJ Styles,
Finn Balor.
Finn Balor, they were smaller than him, but because he liked them, worked with them well, and had respect for them, he was able to still have these outstanding matches. So I think even if they had moved that match to the main event spot, we probably still would have had the same quality match that we got.
Right. Or it could have been better.
Or better, yeah. Or better.
But yeah, and I was gonna say, Brock Lesnar, when he is not in the main event, his best matches happen when he's not in the main event.
Right.
Regardless if they're 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, his best matches have always been when he's in the middle card. I guess maybe because it's like, all right, well,
Doesn't have the pressure of being in the
doesn't
main
have
event.
right, or maybe he just doesn't care at this point because the show's been
Yeah.
too long.
Yeah.
Because look, even when he faced Seth Rollins at WrestleMania in the opening show, I feel like it was way better than the other ones that he had.
Definitely.
They face each other, and it was only like 2 minutes, 3 minutes tops.
3 minutes from belt to belt, not including like all the stuff that they did beforehand with like the beatdown and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But definitely, yeah, Brock, whenever he's motivated, we already know that he can fucking deliver in any spot on the card.
And then he goes up to the guys, and they say, "What do you want to do?" I mean, that's it. He doesn't go and say, "Oh, call in the ring, brother," or "Hey, I'm gonna do this. We're gonna do this." He goes up to them and say, "What do you want to do?"
Yeah.
Because he's like, first of all, I know you can't do much to me, anyways. So
If
ain't
you
gonna
try
hurt.
to shoot at me, yeah. If you try to shoot at me, you know that's not gonna work. I mean, ask Braun Strowman and see how that worked out for him.
Yeah, amen to that. So I got number 8 right here. AJ Styles versus Shinsuke Nakamura. Backlash. That was for the WWE Championship. No disqualification, and the main event was Samoan Joe versus Roman Reigns. Thoughts on that? I mean, this match did end in a in a count out, because they both hit each other with a low blow, got the 10 count, and then that was it.
Right.
So I understand why that didn't close because of the ending, but it's like that wasn't necessary. AJ Styles could have won. It was a no disqualification match. So I don't understand why he didn't win. And then they ended up having another match later on, Money in the Bank,
Yeah.
and a last man standing match, and they still didn't main event the show.
I think the only reason why that one didn't main event is because, and this is more on the creative, is that during that whole feud, Nakamura should have gone over. In my eyes at least,
winning the title.
Winning the title.
Yeah.
Just because we were all so hyped when Nakamura won the Rumble, and we knew that we were getting AJ versus Nakamura at WrestleMania, and all of us were still remembering the Wrestle Kingdom match for the IC title, which was a fantastic match,
Right.
probably one in the top 10 to 15 of anyone in the
And
last decade.
also a lot of matches that well, not a lot, but one of the matches a lot of people forgot about.
Right, and because of that, I think everyone had the feeling and the idea that Nakamura should have gone over. Then they did the story the way they did.
He
At
turned
the
heel.
time with Joe and Roman, Joe, every time that Joe had been in that kind of spot where he was facing for a championship, he was kind of like the same as Nakamura. You kind of felt like he should win it because Joe should have had a championship run too.
Right.
Um,
Facts.
so I could see where you could easily put that also in that main event spot on that card because again, we would know we would have gotten a quality match out of Nakamura and AJ. Just the storyline at the time though just kind of makes it seem like I could kind of see where it fit where it was at that point in time.
Point is, it's like, how do you have AJ Styles versus Shinsuke Nakamura, 3 or 4 at this point? I don't remember. I'm pretty sure it was 3, right?
They did like 3, 4 matches
Because
throughout
well,
that whole program.
because the Greatest Royal Rumble. I don't remember was that before or after Backlash.
Oh, at the time, when did they have it?
I really. Oh, you know what? I think it was before.
Before.
I think that's
Before.
what lead to no disqualification match.
Yes, you're right.
So but yeah, point is just like it was for the WWE Championship. I don't understand why it couldn't main event the show at Backlash and why they decided to take this run where it's like, okay, we're gonna make this storyline into a joke when it could have just been a hard style wrestling classic.
Yep.
If especially if it wasn't gonna be, we all know how Vince McMahon feels about wrestling. So it's like, dude, it's not gonna close out your show. Why couldn't we just get wrestling then?
Right.
And
Getting
if
a good getting a
yeah,
good match out of it.
right. If it was gonna make your main event your pay-per-view, then I could understand how you want it. How do you want to close the show? That's fine. I understand that. It's just, why can't you just still get a great match out of it?
Right.
So, and I don't recall AJ Styles ever main eventing a pay-per-view as WWE champion. Could you?
Oh, damn. Now that you mention it, let me take a second to think.
Because this is the run where he beat Ginger
Gender.
Mahal. But that was Clash of the Champions, but that was a SmackDown brand when he
Right.
first defended the title against Ginger Mahal. But I think going forward until he dropped the title, I don't think he ever main evented a pay-per-view.
No, because I'm thinking after that, he lost it
Daniel Bryan.
to
And that
Daniel
was
Bryan.
and that was on the SmackDown show.
SmackDown show. That was on the SmackDown show too. So you're right. Yeah, I don't think he throughout that whole run, he did have an actual closing main event match as champion.
And Backlash and Money in the Bank were 2 great ones he could have done it.
Definitely.
So
And we already know, like I said, mentioning the New Japan match earlier, we already know that those two guys, if left to their own uh, doing, they would have given us fantastic matches.
yeah, the match at WrestleMania was not bad. It was throughout because after all that matches that we just went through, the match wasn't the same as the Tokyo Dome. Um, but that's expected or expecting or expected.
It's, yeah.
Yeah, and so by the time, if you go back and just watch that match, it's actually really good. I would give
Yeah.
it 4 stars, but at that night, I was like, man, this is 3 stars. It's
Right.
so boring.
Just because of our hype and our expectation of what we wanted and what we ended up getting. But you're
Yeah,
right. Some of those matches you can go back and watch it again maybe a year or two later. And that's sometimes what I'll do with some of these matches. Like the ones that get like this big praise, I'll
right,
give it time to kind of settle, breathe, and then I'll go back and revisit it like a year or two later just to kind of see if it still holds up.
right. Yeah, that's why I have a lot of matches. They were like, oh, these are my forever matches. And then when I go back, I'm just like, I guess it was just the moment. It was the
Right.
emotional rush of seeing the chase, rather if it was for the title or something. It was just like, oh, I enjoy the story more than to the match, I guess.
Yep.
And sometimes that's why people don't do a lot of crazy bumps, because it's like, if you love the story, why should we do crazy stuff in the match?
Right, because the story will hold the fans' attention. That'll hold you,
You're gonna,
hold your
yeah,
this to where you don't need to do crazy spots.
yeah, exactly. So that was number 8. Yes,
Yep.
number 8. My number 7 um is oh my gosh, Sheamus versus Alberto Del Rio versus Chris Jericho versus RVD versus Randy Orton for the World Heavyweight Championship. It was a fatal 4-way match at Over the Limit 2012. The main event was Johnny Ace versus big money match John Cena. Do you remember that?
Yeah. Oh my god. Fucking the start of people power.
I saw
Oh.
your face and eyes. You want to explain your thoughts and feelings about that?
I mean, just because that entire angle with Johnny Ace was just cringe from start to finish. That absolutely, I agree. The Fatal 4-Way should have definitely closed that show. Should have main evented just
Right.
because Johnny Ace was not good in the '80s, was not good in the '90s, and he sure as hell wasn't good in the 2010s.
And I know there's another match on the card that possibly should have main evented as well, but this actually is my next one. So yeah, Sheamus, Alberto the Rio, Chris Jericho, Randy Orton. It was actually a good match, and also Sheamus was another guy who hasn't main evented a pay per view when becoming world champion, and there was 2 matches on a pay per view he could have, and it's one of them is this one, the Fatal 4-Way, and also the one in Hell in a Cell when he had that match with the Big Show.
Yeah,
Those are the 2 matches that could have main evented a pay per view, and obviously didn't. So the other match that could have main evented this pay per view is CM Punk versus Daniel Bryan for the world title. Uh, but the reason I didn't pick this one is because I felt Sheamus should have. He deserved that opportunity, and you had big names on there that could have helped them. And I believe he pinned Chris Jericho. I don't remember, so that should have been a big highlight moment for him, because
yeah.
he eliminated Chris Jericho at the Rumble to become the
The
winner of the
Royal Rumble
Royal
winner.
Rumble winner, and to go main event WrestleMania, opening WrestleMania. So that should have been a big moment for them. And again, so the CM Punk and Daniel Bryan, what did we get? A main event match, a wrestling style
Main event.
main event. And that's the reason. This is why what I said earlier about AJ Styles and Shinsuke Nakamura. This match should have main evented the pay per view, but it's not going to. Fine, give us wrestling then, and that's what
Yeah.
we got from this match. And also
Which
a
is something,
great story too.
yeah, which is something we definitely would have expected from both of them just because of their history. And we know that they work well together. But going back
Right,
to the Sheamus and the Fatal 4-Way, that definitely would have been a great closer because you had, like you mentioned, other participants, even though Del Rio had his fallout and his fall from grace, at
right,
that time, he was good. He was definitely, a golden egg at the time. So you had him, you had Jericho, who we already know it's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer whenever he finally hangs it up and goes in. Randy Orton, same thing.
right.
So you already had 2 well-established, well-known names, one strong up-and-comer, and then the current world champion. You really had the makings of something that would have been a great main event closer. It was a great match still, but it definitely would have been a great closing match.
Exactly. Uh, yeah, it's just, again, I just don't understand it, where and why they thought, hey, John Cena is gonna go over. I mean, he's and Johnny Ace is gonna main event the pay per view, and people think, okay, well, is John going over? I guess so, to make everybody happy. And what happens? The Big Show shows up,
Right.
knockout, uh,
Knockout punch
knockout
to,
punch on Cena's on the top of the head, not in the face, and
yep.
knocks him out. So it was just like, okay, why? Why did that have to close the show that way? What was the purpose of it? And why did it have to go 20 minutes? So I just didn't get it. But yeah, Sheamus should have main events of that pay-per-view. And plus it was for the World Heavyweight Championship.
Yep.
Next on my list is, so the reason why I didn't say CM Punk and Daniel Bryan, one, I felt like Sheamus deserves the Over the Limit, because for CM Punk versus Daniel Bryan, I felt that one at Money in the Bank, since it was a no disqualification match, should have closed the show, and it would have been uh a back-to-back main event for CM Punk at Money in the Bank. But no, it was John Cena main eventing a pay-per-view once again to win the briefcase, even though he did not need it. But yeah, CM Punk and Daniel Bryan, they had a great match. I felt this one, obviously, it was a no disqualification match, but they went at it like crazy, like if it was a street fight.
Yep.
You could really tell like they were doing two mix of wrestling and also like
Brawling.
brawling, extreme rule kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And CM Punk won with a backdrop to a table, onto a table, which have not seen that in a long time at that time.
Yep. Uh, I mean, same as with the last mention, these guys again work well together, and they definitely could have main evented any of those programs in that year,
Right.
really, because at the time it was put everything on Cena, put Cena in every possible main event. It was because he was their golden goose, so he was the one that they were just banking on and overexposing, which is what
Right.
always led back to that drawback that Cena got for a long time, where he just got the hate of the fans and the hate of the, you want to call it, the IWC, wrestling community, wrestling fans, however you want to phrase it.
Right.
It was because of that constant just pushing forward in main events that made no sense.
So for me, I thought the feud was gonna lead to WrestleMania, where I thought it was gonna be CM Punk versus John Cena at WrestleMania 29 for the world title, because I was just like, it has to pinch a nerve for Punk. Obviously, it did, and even storyline wise, where
Yeah,
it's like every pay per view in 2012, you main evented. And as soon as you leave, that's the only time I could main event because you're not here. So
right.
to ensure, what's it called? I main event WrestleMania. I need to face you then. So I'm gonna do whatever it takes in my power for you. Make sure you win. So like kind of he can like screw not screw Cena in a way at the Royal Rumble, but kind of make it look like Cena won, like basically
Right.
helping him to ensure he wins the Royal Rumble and
And goes to face him at
at
WrestleMania.
WrestleMania to finally get his main event match.
But at the
So
same time, because it was WrestleMania 29, we already had kind of been foretold that they were going to have the rematch with him and Rock because of the turnout of WrestleMania 28 and how much money they made off of
right,
28. That
but
it
they
was kind
thought
of like
people also thought it was gonna be Rock versus Punk,
that.
and but then
Honestly,
as soon as the Rock announced whoever's the WWE champion, he's gonna face him at the Rumble, and then people were like, no, it's not gonna be Punk. But at the same time, it's like, well, is Punk really gonna drop the title then at SummerSlam or Night of Champions? Because he eventually ended up facing John Cena at Night of
yeah,
Champion. So, but try to go back to topic that, but yeah, that match that Punk and Daniel Bryan had at Money in the Bank should have main evented the show.
definitely. I mean,
So
they went all out during that. Again, just like at the previous pay per view, they went all out during that too and showed that they could mix it up, give us a combination of wrestling, brawling, extreme rule stuff, and still keep it with an entertaining storyline, which is everything that everyone kind of wants out of a match, out of a show.
right. And it was just like and again, the fact that Punk main evented last year, and it's like you could have just give him that opportunity and also that moment to shine and to get his main event moment. And then they had a great story leading into this pay-per-view, and clearly it was not storyline wise, it wasn't something Punk and Daniel Bryan were okay with, but they just said, okay, whatever, let's do it.
Yeah.
Um But point is, it had a story, and the match that didn't have a story was the Money in the Bank match,
The ladder match,
the
yeah.
ladder match, where it only had four on leading up to the pay per view, but then the day of the pay per view, the Miz was added. So yeah. Next match. What is that? One, two, three, four, five. This is five, so I'm giving you
Yep.
five more, hopefully.
All right.
So number five is Cody Rhodes and Goldust versus the Shield at Battleground. Do you remember that one?
I love that match. That one definitely should have been. That definitely should have main event just because that story had so much investment into it.
Tell me how you real feel. Tell
I
me how you
mean,
really feel.
dude, the whole buildup was great. I mean, the end result was great. Dusty, you know, putting his sons together, giving them the pep talks, having all these talks with these interactions with the authority. The whole part
Right.
where he, you know,
It was a
shush
WrestleMania
Stephanie,
match.
yeah, where he shushed Stephanie during leading up to that, and it was on. It
Woo! That
wasn't
real.
planned.
That
She legit
true
got
heat.
she legit got pissed off at him because that wasn't in the plans. But again, just that matchup had a lot of great story to it that you were wanting that payoff to happen, and we got it. And that's something in a match where the storyline and the emotion warrants that it should have been a main event, a closer match. Because, like you mentioned earlier, there's a whole idea of sending the fans home happy. How
Right.
much more can you send them more happy than having
That
that family
moment.
moment at the end of the show?
And the main event for that one was Randy Orton versus Bryan Danielson for the vacated WWE Championship, and none of them won the title. That was the one
Right,
where Big Show interfered in the match.
right. In contrast, which again, in contrast to what we just said, sending the fans home happy, that's the complete opposite because you have a fuck finish
Exactly.
with
Oh,
Big Show of all people again coming in and getting involved. And at that time, that was when everyone was so fed up with Big Show too, where they were
right.
just telling him retire, go away, you know. And for Bryan and Orton, we had seen that match a lot at that point in time already. So it didn't feel fresh. It didn't feel new.
Mm-hmm.
It was just like, okay, we'll probably see a rematch of this at the next pay per view, and maybe then it can happen. So it didn't need to be in that spot.
It did. And it didn't have to close the show. And plus, with that bogus finish, why did it close the show?
Right.
Why make this story? You make it seem like, oh my gosh, this storyline is gonna main event the pay per view, this brand new pay per view, and it flopped. And that was
Right.
the only good match on the card. Like it was here, and then the next was Punk and Ryback.
Oh my god.
Yeah, that's it. But then you see the
Yeah.
gap.
The gap
That's
between one to the other. Exactly.
yeah, and that says a lot. So the fact that the second good match was Ryback versus CM Punk, that says a lot.
Of that whole show in general.
Exactly. So all right, so number four, I got John Cena versus Kevin Owens at Elimination Chambers pay-per-view. This is the first time when John Cena calls Kevin Owens for not Kevin Owens, he calls anybody for as a US Open challenge. Kevin Owens answered. It had a big reaction, a big pop. The fact that he power bombed John Cena, and so you have NXT champion Kevin Owens versus the US champion John Cena. And it should have been it was huge. It was like the fact that again, I don't know why they have the Elimination Chamber match pay-per-view just for the IC title and the tag team title. And
Mm-hmm.
if all people they gave the title to Ryback, no disrespect, but I feel like Dolph Ziggler should have won it. Um, but the fact it was just like you had again Kevin Owens NXT versus John Cena's Monday Night Raw US champion, that should have closed the show. And it was a really great match. I believe it was match of the night. So and they continued this whole feud, and the elimination chamber wasn't even the main event. It was Seth Rollins versus Dean Ambrose for the WWE World Heavyweight Championship, and it ended in a no DQ.
Same.
So
I mean, the Elimination Chamber, me personally, it's how I feel it as a pay per view is that it shouldn't even be a thing. That match should be a very special match, kind of like Hell in a Cell too. Hell in a Cell shouldn't even be a pay per view either. They should just bring those out whenever there's like a we need to settle this shit once and for all kind of
right,
matches. But with that being said, yeah, definitely Owens and Cena should have main evented just because that match alone elevated Kevin Owens. Now you could just imagine how much more elevated would have been having him in the final match, because when he answered that challenge, that was a big reaction. That was a big pop because nobody really expected him of all people to
right,
come out. Maybe someone from NXT, but maybe not the NXT champion. And the fact that he came out and he gave it to Cena, he on that opening segment, giving him the pop power bomb, picking up the NXT title and then stepping on the US title and holding the NXT title up, that was just putting the stamp on the brand that is NXT and giving NXT a big shot in the arm.
right.
Go throughout that whole program, which again, Cena gave a lot to Kevin Owens. He definitely helped, elevate him throughout that whole program. But I think if you had that first match be the closing moment with Kevin Owens standing tall, boom, he's still a star, but he would have shortened that gap, to stardom
Right.
even more.
Exactly. And then after that, he was kind of just like this.
Yeah, until they kind
Honestly,
of
yeah. But I mean, he was on TV. He was the IC champion later on, so it all worked out for him.
mm-hmm.
So and then eventually becoming Universal
Universal
Champion,
champion. Yeah, when Finn went down.
right? So that was my number 4. But before was it 4? So I got 3 left, right? Okay.
Yep, 3 left.
Before we give you my top 3, I just want to let the listeners know to please check out our merch store, teesprings.com. And also, we're also on Pro Wrestling Tees. Thank you so much for having us on there. Also, check us out on our IG, New Etcher Wrestling Pod. You know what? Everything's down in the link. I don't know why I keep doing this for YouTube. The beginning of the show, sure. But right now, just everything's down in the link. Spotify, Google, Apple
Go.
Podcasts. Just click on there. IG too. Follow us. We're also on Twitter. I don't know if our Twitter's on there, but it should be.
If not, yeah, we can add it on there.
Yeah. All right. So my number 3. Now bear with me. All right. Number 3 is Dean Ambrose versus Luke Harper at Extreme Rules. 2015. It was the opening match. They were facing in was it in Chicago? Was it a street fight? Yeah, Chicago street fight. The main event was Randy Orton versus Seth Rollins in a steel cage match. So now hear me out. When they opened the show, they could have opened the show. It's the fact that they continue their match and they came back to the ring in the middle of the show where it should have happened towards towards the end of the main event. So they left the All States Arena. I hope they did, because I'm pretty sure it was a Chicago street fight. They left All States Arena, and instead of coming back, I don't remember what match they came back from, but Seth Rollins, he's the WWE Championship. He beat Randy Orton, and that's where Dean Ambrose and Luke Harper should have came through the audience after the main event, and that way so they could have continued the whole continue the match going, because that's what they did. The match like kind of ended in a way like 15 minutes, but then it went for another like hour.
Yeah, they were fighting elsewhere and stuff like that.
And the referee followed them too, so the match technically was still going on. They should have waited until after the main event for them to come back, and then that would have been, one, hilarious, and two, the longest match in WWE history, going on for 3 hours. So that would have been great for them, and everybody would have been happy, and also going home wise, and also it's a great way leading into Payback. So Payback was the next pay-per-view, because if Dean Ambrose, obviously he beat Luke Harper, then he could have seen Seth Rollins like on the ramp. and
Right.
just basically saying during the belt sign
Belt
saying,
thing, yeah.
yeah, you're
I'm
next.
next. Yeah.
Yeah, it would have been a great way to do all that. That's how I would have booked it.
I mean, Luke Harper should have gotten more main events than he got a chance to have.
Right.
Um, and him and Dean, because of their styles, really did match up really well in a brawling sense.
Right.
And that brawl was fun to watch. And you're right, if they could have done that kind of scenario where the match started, they went into the crowd, they kept on fighting, Ref follows them up, and it just continues. And they could have even done like cuts in between the show, seeing where they were
Exactly.
at, seeing where they were at throughout the building. If they were fighting in the concession stands, if they were fighting in the bathrooms, or they were fighting in the parking lot.
Throughout
Even
every match, they could have gone backstage and make it look like, hey, they're getting back closer and closer and closer
and then
towards
by
the
the
end of the
time,
main
yeah,
event. Yeah.
and then by the time the main event, you have the finish because again, Randy versus Seth, as great as they both are, that was just an overdone matchup.
And it took everything away from the match because Randy Orton couldn't use the RKO was banned for the match
Right,
inside steel cage, so it kind of took away the fun of it. And it's
right,
like, I mean, yeah, it'd be cool because it's like the one thing we could expect is Randy Orton is gonna do a RKO out of nowhere
right.
because it's banned. But the fact is, like, it takes away his finish, so
You,
clearly he's not
I
gonna
mean,
go over.
they could have even worked it into that because, like we say, we could have had them coming in from the crowd as a distraction. Seth is like looking at them like, and the ref is looking like, what the hell is going on? Then when Seth turns around, all of a sudden,
Yeah,
Randy hits him with an RKO. The ref doesn't see it, so it's not declared, an illegal tactic. And then you
but
could have
that
gone
it
into
takes and it takes away from the from selling the RKO because the ref is
this,
distracted, turns around, he's like, oh, okay, my bad, my bad. 1, 2, kick out.
right,
So
and then you could have gone into the finish after that.
right. And then that's how you could have had Dean Ambrose beating Luke Harper, and they could have gone inside the cage. They didn't even have to
Yeah,
bring the cage back up.
right. They
So
could have like the door been unlocked or somebody raises it a little bit off the floor and they just slide underneath and then they're
right,
just in there brawling at it too. It would have been a lot of fun if that could have been played out like that.
yeah, it could have and it should have, man.
Yeah.
But that's why I kind of put it. I feel like obviously because of how the match would have been built to closing the main event, that's why I put it a little bit higher. Because again, it would have been like the longest match in WWE history or ever.
Right.
But here's my number 2. All right. So this is these are the 2 matches where I'm like, I can't believe they couldn't even have this moment. Number 2 is CM Punk versus Chris Jericho Payback 2013 in Chicago, Illinois. Why couldn't he just have that moment?
I mean, any any time while they had Punk in the company and they were in Chicago, they should have had him in a main event spot. Just because you already know, we already saw it from a year ago at the United Center that anytime he was performing in Chicago, you would have gotten a pop. You would have gotten a rating. You would have gotten a number. You've
Right.
gotten a huge reaction from Chicago just because how Chicago fans love Chicago grown stars. I mean,
Exactly.
and we even see it with other folks that are, built out of Chicago, even though they might not be bigger on the cards, but as soon as they're there and they're representing Chicago on their way out, they get a big reaction. And we're talking like
Right.
Ali.
Exactly.
That's what I'm
Yep.
using as an example. Last time he was in Chicago, he had that fucking dope ass Chicago flag gear. He had a great reaction. And even before that, he was a heel before that, not that long ago before that match. And when he came out, he got a big babyface reaction. And then at that time too, with that story with Jericho and Punk, that had a lot of good build to it because there was a whole thing of calling Punk's straight edge into question.
No,
And
that was the WrestleMania.
that was WrestleMania.
This
You're right. You're
one
right.
was CM Punk can't claim he's the best in the world since he
World
took his ball and went
and
home after he lost to the Undertaker.
that's right. Now I remember. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right. You're right. You're right.
So this one was truly about being best
Who
in the
was
world.
in the world?
And they could have had CM Punk could have had his moment main eventing that pay-per-view. Don't I understand John Cena, right back, 3 stages of hell. But one, that match shouldn't even happen because of the 3 stages of hell matches were a lumberjack match, a tables match, and once you go through all that, the third fall, if necessary, is a stretcher match. No, ambulance match.
Match. Same difference. A stretcher ambulance
Yeah.
match.
So I didn't why, and also it could have been any kind of match. Could have been a steel cage match. Well, Brock Lesnar and Triple H was a steel cage match, Extreme Rules, but could have been a no holds bar, false count anywhere.
They could have ran
It could have
another
been anything.
stipulation. They could have
Yes,
had another stipulation. There was that feud did not call for a 3 stages of hell match. There was nothing about
right. It was
that
nothing
entire thing.
personal.
Yeah, that could have said like, oh no, we need to settle it this way. They could have done any other kind of stipulation on there.
And in the matches they picked, again, it didn't make sense. A lumberjack match, tails match, sure, okay.
Yeah,
Ambulance, sure, but it should have been the first fall should have been no disqualification, false count anywhere, something.
yeah.
Or it should have been the tables match, and then the second match could have been steel cage,
And then the
street
third
fight or
match,
something.
yeah,
But no, they went with lumberjack, tables, and ambulance match, or it could have just been an ambulance match.
that alone by itself.
Because the
Oh,
ambulance match, the lumberjack match was about 12 to 15 minutes. Another 3 minutes for the tables match.
table match.
And in the last 8 to 10 minutes, it was the ambulance match.
Which for the amount of time they gave the tables match, you could have just had table spots in the ambulance match. You could have made an ambulance match and just had table spots in it.
Right.
That would have covered for what they did in those 3 minutes in a tables match.
I feel like, yeah, it was unnecessary. It could have just been a ambulance match. That's it. You could have had, it would have been better because like I said, the first 12 to 15 minutes, it was a regular wrestling match.
Right.
And it wasn't a good one. Comparing to Punk and Chris Jericho, that was
Jericho
wrestling and storytelling. This was just like we both hate each other and we want to hurt each other. But how? With those matches, you can't.
Yeah.
So I don't know. But yeah, Punk, he hit Chris Jericho with not one but two STS, right? Go to sleep.
GTS. Yep.
GTS. What the hell did I say?
STS.
Oh my gosh. Okay. GTF. No, my gosh. GTS. Jeez. All right, that was my number 2. Punk, Chris Jericho, Payback. My number 1 is the only reason why. So as an adult, CM Punk, Chris Jericho, number 1. But as a kid, my number 1 is gonna be Hulk Hogan versus Randy Orton. SummerSlam 2006. The main event, there was 2 crappy main events. DX versus the McMahon family.
Oh
and
my
then,
god.
John Cena, no, Edge. Well, yeah, regardless. John Cena versus Edge for the WWE Championship. Edge was champion. And it was John Cena's hometown. And so John Cena lost. Edge hit him with the breast knuckles, got the 1, 2, 3, and it was just like, why didn't Hogan and Randy Orton? And I don't care what anybody thinks, but that was the best match on the card and should have main evented that pay-per-view. And especially that Hogan was going over. I mean, I feel like Randy Orton should have gone over, but I mean, I just didn't understand why he didn't main evented.
That 2006 one for Hogan, yeah, that definitely had a better storyline to it. That it could have been in that kind of spot, especially over the McMahon DX crap. Even though it is funny and juvenile comedy,
right?
It didn't need to be in one of those main event spots. That could have been 4th from the card, or it could have
that could have been for the Hogan and Randy Orton spot.
Or yeah, they could have had that second to last spot, or even that main event spot. Edge and Cena, that one, I mean, they've had so many matches that one is just kind of like one amongst the middle ones, not one of their better ones.
Right.
So
the best one they had was in the Royal Rumble during that time.
During that time. So yeah, you could have easily fitted in Hogan and Orton into that spot and given Hogan a big moment there.
Yeah, and it was just weird because again, if this was the first time ever, okay, sure. of course. Why wouldn't I want to? But I already seen it.
Right,
And I was just like, I was just so weird. Because I was just like, I don't want to wait for this match. I mean, like, unless John Cena wins, but an Edge loss, and I was just like, oh, okay.
right.
So I was like,
That,
it took my happiness away from the Hogan match.
right. And
So
a lot of common threads is like that we noticed that at least that I kind of picked up on these on this list is the ones that were the actual main event. Going back to what
didn't,
we said earlier, it wasn't really sending the fans home content, happy, because they were in like full finishes where you could say, all right, crowd got their what they wanted, they got the moment, and they didn't. It was just a series of almost fuck finishes the entire list, really. I mean, almost every match had a funky finish that was just like, okay, kind of leaves you with a meh.
yeah, it takes, yeah. And I'm kind of glad that you noticed that because honestly, while I was doing this list, I didn't really think about it like that, that all the pay-per-view matches we got robbed, but maybe that's why I remember them. So,
Maybe so, but I think the memorable moment sticks out most because I mean, like I said, going back to the Cody and Dustin tag
yeah,
match
out of
with that,
everything, that's the only thing I remember.
like that out of that show, that's the one thing I remember because it's a very memorable one because that whole program was just fun with how the emotion that all three of the Rhodes family members, were able to drum up, and the Shield just being great heels at the time, just wanting to go ahead and eliminate all of them and just be done with them and get them out of WWE at the time.
I
That
think,
yeah,
yeah,
if anything, looking forward to it now. Now that we have Cody back in WWE, and looking forward to maybe the possible matchup with him and Roman. You could even drum some of that stuff back up just to add more drama to that upcoming, whenever that match happens.
right.
Whenever Cody comes back, and you have a moment like that, like they could bring that up and bring that emotion back up almost 10 years later.
Yeah, you're right. Next year will be 10 years.
Exactly.
So
So fucking lines up.
it lines up. Hey, but yeah, man, thanks for listening to my list, brother. So
Of course, of
appreciate it.
course.
I don't know how to ask this because again, this is my opinion, but which one do you like besides all of them? Is there one match that stood out for you?
Well, I think, like I said, we just talked about it. That's the tag team match is the one that really stood out. And to kind of go over to the very first match you mentioned with Dolph and Miz, um, probably because they're best friends, and usually guys that are best friends can have great matches together just because they know each other well.
Right.
I really think that match, even or in that whole feud, should have had a lot more room to breathe and really build up on that story that it should have been in that main event spot too. Just because, and I kind of like seeing like Miss and seeing how much of an interaction Miz and actually Dolph have because they are hometown boys. They're from the same part and they get along great. That you can actually see them having actually great matches. And even though Dolph is probably not probably is the better technical wrestler out of the two, Miz also being a great entertainer, they could really mesh up well and put on great matches.
Yeah. And then it would have been, I mean, the only thing about it is they went on and had another rematch and the Miz took the title away from him. I don't remember how far exactly. I think it was the night
Right.
before I think it was the night before Survivor Series that he took the title back, and then they had a ladder match at TLC.
Yeah.
So I feel like that ladder match, should have happened at WrestleMania. Um, or again, could have closed out that pay per view because it just drives me crazy that they haven't main evented a pay per view when they had so many matches together.
Right.
And the one match they haven't had together is for the WWE title. Yeah. So before we go, I wanted to play this little thing with you. That sounds weird.
Pause.
Pause. Hold on. Rewind. I want to play this game. It's called This or That. So basically, I'm gonna give you two wrestlers, and you're just either gonna pick either or.
All
Basically,
right.
somebody you like better. This or that, Bret Hart or Edge.
Bret Hart.
Eddie Guerrero or Owen Hart?
Eddie.
All right. Rey Mysterio versus RVD. I mean, Rey Mysterio or RVD.
Ray.
Stephanie McMahon or Trish Stratus.
Trish.
Triple H or Randy Orton.
Triple H.
Bubba Ray, Bully Ray, or Mick Foley.
Mick.
Becky or Sasha Banks.
Becky.
Cody Rhodes or Seth freaking Rollins.
Seth.
Okay, nice. I like the choices you picked. So you hesitated on Eddie Guerrero and Owen Hart. You hesitated on Cody and Seth Rollins. Everybody else, it was like I know.
Quick, yeah, quick fire.
You're quick. Now there's another thing I got for you. So it's called King of the Ladder. So I'm gonna give you again two names, but instead of eliminating both, whoever you pick is gonna move up the ranks, and it's gonna face somebody else. And basically, I'm gonna give you a whole list, and let's see who survives your list. And it's gonna be on your top of their King of the Ladder thing.
All right.
All right. So starting off with two people, The Miz or MGF. MJF. Sorry.
Miz.
Miz. Okay. Miz versus Dolph Ziggler.
Dolph.
Dolph Ziggler versus Adam Cole.
Dolph.
Dolph Ziggler versus Sami Zayn. Sami
Sammy.
Zayn. Sami Zayn versus Bobby Fish.
Sammy.
Sammy versus Bobby Lashley.
Sammy.
Sammy versus Roman Reigns.
Sammy.
Sammy versus John Cena.
Still Sammy for me. Yeah.
Sammy versus Bret Hart.
Bret.
Bret Hart versus Ric Flair.
Bret.
Bret versus Eddie Guerrero.
Fuck. Ed.
This is your last one. So Bret Hart or Eddie Guerrero?
Bret.
So Bret Hart is king of the ladders, but Sami Zayn hold on pretty long. I think it was tied basically. So if I would have, because I said Bret Hart before Ric Flair, who would have won for Sami or Ric Flair?
Probably Rick. I probably would have picked Rick. I mean, like I said, I love Sammy and I love his current run too. Everything that he's done as a heel has been fun, and the fact that he's kind of slowly maybe might be going babyface again.
Right.
It kind of gives that open that we know that Sammy could be a great babyface because Sammy in NXT as a babyface was awesome. You know, the whole build up to him beating Neville for the NXT title. You know, it was a great babyface moment. So he has been someone who very low key has maintained a level of entertainment for the last 2-3 years, whether he's doing the stuff with the bloodline, he's doing the jackass stuff, which again, seeing it live, he fucking killed it in that spot, you know, and that's not easy to work with a lot of the jackass guys just because, you know, the kind of crazy shit that they do.
Exactly.
To the stuff that he did with Kevin Owens that he's done over the years. And
I think here's the thing. Have you been a fan outside of Sami Zayn?
His El Generico.
Work?
I mean, like,
so
as El Generico, I love his stuff with him and Kevin Steen.
Right. But there's some people, because of El Generico, that's why people don't like how he is, because they know how he could be.
Right.
But to me, it's like I like Sami Zayn. I get to see he still does the same moves.
Yeah.
As much. But I wish he just do once in a while the brain buster. Yeah. Just once in a while, throw it in there, man. So that's all I miss. Other than that, it's like, yeah, I like Sammy's work. He does great work. And as much as I love El Genetico, but I still have the memory. The only thing I do regret is not seeing him live. El Genetico. I finally saw Sami Zayn live not that while ago, and it was it was a bittersweet because I was happy to finally see him live, but it was like, damn, I wish I would have saw him when he was El Genetico.
Yeah, I mean, the last time I saw him live was the last time they did SmackDown here, and it was him against Nakamura. and they had a great match.
Oh
And it was
yeah.
fun, and it was fun seeing it, getting a chance to see it live, especially seeing them two live against each other. Because
Another
remember
match
that
that should have another match that could have main evented a pay-per-view.
because I remember the NXT Dallas, the first time that they did NXT Dallas, and you had that match that they had, and the whole channel Fight Forever started right then and there.
Right.
That they had this fucking fantastic match there. So getting a chance to see, a version of that, live was fucking great.
Yeah, it was just a very crazy match. The whole Fight Forever got the whole goosebumps and everything.
Right.
It was just like, whoa. That's where me personally, it's like one, it's crazy how a lot of people forgot about it because I honestly forgot about it until you brought it up.
Yeah.
So, but another match people should need to check it out.
Definitely.
So, any last words before we head out?
No, man. Again, thanks for having me on. It's always great to be on here and be a part of the show.
Yeah, thanks for being on once again. And don't worry, this time I brought you as a guest, not because I needed somebody. Ever was now on vacation this time, finally. So I just appreciate it. You being on it. So thank you very
Absolutely, brother.
much.
No problem, man.
So, all right, ladies and gentlemen, we are out. Till next time, I am Ian. That's Jose.
See you
Until next
guys.
time, we are out. Doo-doo-doo. Yay!